Hidden among the mountainous landscapes of northern Portugal, the Pópulo Hillfort holds secrets that are thousands of years old. Between unusual walls and forgotten remains, this site may contain clues about the ancient peoples who inhabited this region and their construction techniques, which are unique in the Iberian Peninsula. But why do we know almost nothing about it? And what mysteries does its rare polygonal wall hide? Come and discover Portugal with us. Please like, subscribe, and leave your comment. Your support and opinions are very important to us. Thank you. Located in the parish of Pópulo, in the municipality of Alijó, district of Villarreal, the Pópulo Hillfort, also known as the Castle of São Marcos or Touca Rota Hillfort, stands at an altitude of around 720 meters, on an elevation overlooking the streams of Sabrosa and Val do Cunho. Its dominant position over the valley allowed it to control the natural communication routes and the surrounding agricultural territories, which were essential for the survival of the community that inhabited it. The proximity of watercourses and the richness of the region's soils favored agriculture and cattle breeding, fundamental activities for the economy of these populations, both in the distant past and today. Historically, this site was mentioned in old documents such as the parish memoir of 1758, in which the local priest Gonçalo Domingos described the parish of Pópulo as being situated in a high and rough meadow, with a raised hill of crags to the southwest and another to the east, both fortified by pre- and proto-historic peoples, especially the second, formerly called Castle of São Marcos. The same author indicates that next to this fort stood the very remote chapel of Santa Maria do Pópulo, the oldest temple certainly of the Christian peoples who settled here, referring to the chapel that today is better known as the sanctuary of Nossa Senhora da Boa Morte. While its proximity to the town of Pópulo and the presence of a small chapel dedicated to São Marcos, Saint Mark, within its walled area clearly explain two of the names by which this settlement is known, the name Touca Rota, torn cap, remained shrouded in doubt. The region of Trás-os-Montes is rich in legends linked to the Moura Encantada, the enchanted Moorish woman, often associated by tradition with ancient archaeological sites, whose origin and extremely remote authorship had been forgotten by the people, thus being associated with the time of the Moors. Could the name Touca Rota Hillfort be the result of a forgotten oral tradition that associated these ruins with a female figure whose headdress, which would have been a veil or covering for her head, had been torn? Or does the name refer to the place where the settlement is located, perhaps recalling the moment in the distant past when it was conquered and eventually destroyed by an invading army, standing on the head of the hill like a torn cap? All of this is pure speculation because, in all likelihood and given the lack of written sources, we will never know for sure. This place has certainly acquired religious importance over the centuries, as evidenced by the small chapel of São Marcos, but above all by the chapel of Nossa Senhora da Boa Morte, the Lady of Good Death, which is at the center of an important cult and pilgrimage that takes place every year on the first Sunday of September. This chapel, which dates back to the 17th century, has a gallery protecting the space adjacent to its main portal. Its magnificent interior is profusely painted and decorated with gilded and polychrome carvings. Highlights include the ceiling of the nave, decorated in the 18th century with Rococo motifs depicting angels and phylacteries relating to the Litanies of the Virgin by Bartolomeu de Mesquita, and the coffered ceiling of the chancel, with paintings depicting scenes from the life of Christ and the Virgin. The landscape around the Pópulo Hillfort is fragmented but interconnected by natural routes and ancient roads, revealing a territory with a strong dynamism from proto-history to classical antiquity. Although it has never been the subject of systematic archaeological excavations, analysis of the surface remains and comparison with other hill forts in the region allow us to infer that this fortification was occupied for a long time, from the Iron Age to the Roman period. It is suggested that its foundation dates back to the 4th or 3rd century BC, but this dating is purely speculative, as the origins of this settlement may be more remote. An example of this is the Trás-os-Montes Hillfort, located a few kilometers away but already in the municipality of Mursa, which shows traces of human occupation ranging from the Chalcolithic or Copper Age in the 3rd millennium BC to the end of the Iron Age, when it was abandoned after the arrival of the Romans. The Pópulo Hillfort is thus part of a vast group of fortified settlements in the region, with almost 24 structures of this kind having been identified in the municipality of Alijó alone so far. The number increases if we include the neighbouring municipalities, painting the picture of a region of great human activity since at least the Bronze Age. About 13 kilometers north of the Pópulo Hillfort was the Trás-os-Montes mining complex, one of the largest and most important Roman centers of gold and silver extraction on the Iberian Peninsula. Looking at the layout of the Roman roads that crossed the region, following the remarkable survey carried out by Pedro Soutinho, which can be consulted in more detail on the link provided in the description of this video, the route that connected Aquae Flaviae, Chaves, to Celurico da Beira passed from north to south near Trás-os-Montes, with a bifurcation in Campo de Jales. One of the routes headed towards the Douro River, passing by the hill forts of Pópulo, Valdemir and Carlão, fortified settlements that already existed before Romanization, indicating that this route was created and used before the arrival of the Romans. The other route from Campo de Jales continued towards Lamares, where it forked into an eastern path heading towards the Douro River crossing at Pinhão or near the mouth of the river Tedo, and another heading west towards the crossing at Covelinhas. The latter route passed through Panoias, where there is an important sanctuary located approximately 18 kilometers southwest of Pópulo, which was one of the largest Romanized sacred sites in the north of Portugal and about which we have previously published an in-depth video. You may find a link for it in the description. The choice of the site and its fortification are indicative of a historical period marked by the need for defense against possible intertribal conflicts or external incursions. These hill forts, occupied by agro-pastoral communities, played a fundamental role in the political and economic organization of the region's peoples, functioning as housing centers and territorial control points. They are part of what is commonly known as the Castro Culture, which extends throughout the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula, covering the regions of Minho, Douro Litoral and Trás-os-Montes in what is now Portugal. However, the knowledge accumulated over the last century about the Minho hill forts, corresponding to the area we can consider to be coastal, is vastly superior to that which exists about the fortified settlements in the Trás-os-Montes area, where few excavations have been carried out and on which almost no studies have been published. It is therefore not surprising that places such as the Citânia de Santa Luzia in Viana do Castelo, the Citânia de Briteiros in Guimarães, and the Citânia de Sanfins in Passos de Ferreira are widely known and have thus contributed almost exclusively to the formation of the generalized idea of what Castro culture was. It should also be noted that there are structures classified as Castros or hill forts to the south of the river Douro, namely in the area of the current districts of Aveiro, Viseu and Guarda. The term is also applied to structures throughout the country, as far as the Algarve, designating fortified settlements from various historical periods, confirming that it sheds little or no light on why, when, or where these structures were built. Even if we focus only on the northern region of Portugal, the known hill forts have different characteristics between those located in Minho and the Douro Litoral region and those in Trás-os-Montes. In the case of the former, some of the settlements had a considerable size, covering areas several hectares in area and being home to populations of thousands of people, the largest known to date being the Cidade de Bagunt in Vila do Conde, with an impressive 50 hectares. In these communities, the most common architectural pattern was buildings with a circular or oval floor plan, grouped together in well-organized clusters or neighbourhoods. The Castros of Trás-os-Montes, on the other hand, are more dispersed and less urbanized, and are much smaller than the ones in Minho. They could be organized around family or tribal units. They have buildings with different floor plans, ranging from circular to rectangular, the latter in later periods. Unlike many hill forts in present-day Minho and Douro Litoral, their counterparts in Trás-os-Montes show few signs of strong Romanization, suggesting greater resistance to integration or almost complete abandonment after their conquest by Roman forces. These differences can be explained by cultural factors, since the Minho region was deeply influenced by Bracara Augusta, now Braga, one of the main centers of Roman Hispania. Conversely, the region of Trás-os-Montes was occupied by multiple people such as the Zoelai and the Tamagani, who may have undergone a less intense process of acculturation during the Roman presence. Geographical factors may also have played a key role, since the Minho region has a landscape marked by fertile valleys and rivers, with a milder climate, which naturally favored the formation of larger settlements with vast networks of contacts due to its proximity to the sea. Trás-os-Montes, on the other hand, due to its rugged terrain and harsh climate, very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer, would have required more dispersed settlements of a smaller size, adapted to a subsistence economy based on pastoralism and agriculture. Thus, with the arrival of the Romans between the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, many castros were gradually abandoned or integrated into the administrative and military structure of the empire. Material evidence of this Romanization at the Pópulo Hillfort includes numerous fragments of Roman roof tiles, tegulae, fine ceramics such as Hispanic terra sigillata, and even some coins that were found in its surroundings. These superficial findings suggest that this site maintained some occupation or at least commercial relations with Romanized centers. The discovery of a funerary stele reused in the construction of a house, located in the nearby village of Val do Cunho, about 1 kilometer from Pópulo Hillfort, may indicate the existence of a necropolis associated with the proto-historic fortification, which was still in use during the Roman period. On this stele, which is very eroded and difficult to read, a consecration to the Manes gods is made by Reburria Flavina, aged 40. After the Roman period, there is no clear evidence of permanent occupation on the top of the fort. Possibly, as happened with many other fortified settlements, the progressive pacification of the region and the emergence of new models for occupying the territory led to its desertification and consequent oblivion. However, the continued use of the site in later times is suggested by the existence of the medieval chapel mentioned in historical records and later the chapel of Nossa Senhora da Boa Morte at the foot of the hill. This indicates that the hill maintained a role in the community's imagination and experience, possibly as a legendary castle or sacred place, even after it ceased to be inhabited as a fortified settlement. In terms of its structure, Pópulo Hillfort has a floor plan adapted to the mountainous terrain, something common in Iron Age fortified settlements in the northwest of the Iberian Peninsula. The layout of the walls and the predictable arrangement of the housing platforms suggest a medium-sized settlement, structured in such a way as to make the most of the terrain's natural defenses. The internal architecture of the settlement is difficult to determine without excavations, but by analogy with other settlements in the region, it is likely that it included circular and oval dwellings, as well as possible communal structures. The main structure is delimited by two lines of walls which protect the central core of the village, integrating the natural cliff and surrounding the hill in its entirety. These two walls form a narrow corridor about 10 meters wide between them, which would act as a second line of defense, making it more difficult for invaders to advance. The inner wall has a circular turret on the northwest flank, built over an existing wicket in the second circuit of walls. A third line of walls runs from the northwest flank of the second wall. The Pópulo Hillfort has very well preserved sections of wall, some of which are 3 meters high. But the most unique element of this settlement is its polygonal wall, a very rare construction on the Iberian Peninsula and possibly the only one in Portugal. This structure, which stands out for the complexity of its construction, is made up of blocks that have 5 or more angles on their face, as opposed to ashlars, which have 4 right angles, without the use of any type of mortar. Most of the surviving sections of walls in this settlement have a construction system closer to that of the majority of fortified settlements in the region, with small or medium-sized blocks, roughly shaped to promote stable overlapping, but with some visible space between them. The difference between the two construction techniques becomes more blatant and obvious when a direct comparison is made, even giving the idea that they are different buildings. In other segments, there are some larger blocks with a polygonal shape located in the lower part of the wall, on top of which progressively smaller blocks have been superimposed, some of which also have a polygonal profile. This type of construction can also be seen in other fortified settlements, such as the Cidade de Santa Luzia in Viana do Castelo, where there are larger blocks at the base, which have been overlaid with smaller blocks of different shapes. Even so, some sections of the wall in Pópulo seem to suggest the existence of reused larger blocks with polygonal shape, on and between which the rest of the wall was built with smaller blocks. The segment of wall shows just that, with blocks of different sizes and shapes mixed together and superimposed on the rocky substrate of the hill. Do they correspond to a continuous construction or the superimposition of later reconstructions on an original older base? However, the existing wall segment on the northwest side of the Pópulo Hillfort is completely different from the others, featuring polygonal blocks with flat interior faces, promoting a remarkable fit between them. Its outer faces have also been flattened to form a more uniform surface, which seems to indicate an aesthetic intention on the part of its builders. On the north side, the difference between the construction technique of this segment and the one that was added, which was much simpler and more common, is clearly visible. In one of its sections we can also see a small opening, deliberately created to drain the water accumulated in the ground behind the blocks, since this wall clearly had a function of supporting or containing the ground behind it, thus forming a raised platform. It has obvious similarities with the techniques used in other parts of the Mediterranean world, particularly in the Cyclopean architecture of Mycenaean Greece, which dates back to the Bronze Age. The similarities are even greater in terms of the precision of the fittings between the blocks and the visible flattened faces, with the polygonal walls of Italic cities such as Alatri and Norba, whose authorship has generated multiple theories over time, from the Pelasgic peoples with origins in Greece to the Latin peoples of the region. They have also been attributed to the Etruscans and Romans, and most of the polygonal walls of central Italy, including those of Alatri, Ferentino and Segni, are today associated with pre-Roman Italic peoples such as the Ernici and the Volsci. In the Iberian Peninsula, some vaguely similar structures can be found in Tarragona and Ampurias, constructions associated by archaeologists with the Greco-Roman period, but the presence of a polygonal wall sector in a fortification with the geographical position of Pópulo raises interesting questions about possible external influences and the technological sophistication of the peoples who lived here. In some hill forts in the area of present-day Minho and Douro Litoral, traces have been found that confirm the existence of trade with the Mediterranean area, namely with the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians and the Greeks. But the finds of fragments of Attic ceramics, which would have been a product of high status and a sign of prestige, in Trás-os-Montes Hillfort, located deep in the north of Portugal and less than 10 kilometers from Pópulo, reveal a chain of trade that was very developed even before the arrival of the Romans. We also know that this region was a point of passage and interaction between various peoples and cultures throughout proto-history, from the so-called Celtiberian Castros of northern Portugal and Galicia to others from the heart of the Iberian Peninsula, such as the Asturians, the Lusitanians and the Vetones. An example of the latter is the existence of verraco sculptures all over Trás-os-Montes, the most popular of which is the Porca de Mursa, the Mursa pig, which is now proudly displayed in that town's centre. Could these networks and interactions have brought more than just physical objects, also contributing to the transmission of knowledge and information, particularly in terms of construction? But if that were the case, why is this section of polygonal wall at Pópulo Hillfort a unique find? Was it the result of a local and independent development of this technique, without external intervention, thus constituting an anomaly? Is this an older vestige that was later included in the hill fort during the Iron Age or during Romanization, resulting from an earlier historical period such as the Bronze Age? Or could the influx of people from other regions of the Roman Empire, including the Italian peninsula itself, have led to the isolated import of masons or engineers who mastered a construction technique that has some of its most notable examples in that part of the Mediterranean? For all these reasons, the Pópulo Hillfort remains an enigma, a site with unexplored historical and archaeological potential. Its polygonal wall, possibly unique in the Iberian Peninsula, raises fundamental questions about the construction techniques and cultural influences of the peoples who inhabited this territory before and after the arrival of the Romans. The lack of excavations prevents us from understanding the true scale of its importance and the role it played in the network of Iron Age and Roman settlements. Its architectural uniqueness and strategic location would justify a more in-depth archaeological investigation that could reveal essential information about its inhabitants, its social organization, and its evolution over the centuries. The study of this fort could not only fill gaps in the region's history, but also contribute to the enhancement and preservation of the archaeological heritage of Trás-os-Montes, ensuring that sites like this don't fall into oblivion. I have always been fascinated by civilizations that left their symbols and signs unexplained. Perhaps because I belong to an age bent on revealing everything about itself to future generations in shameless abandon. And wherever I sense a prehistoric trace, there I am, close, musing, surrendered, and grateful for a silence that, among other things, is an early tribute to our imagination. Whatever it may be capable of, so too will the aligned stones, the crumbling walls, the enigmatic inscriptions, the colored fingerprints. All that they witness is inscribed within us, for we are the heirs of all human history. Thank you for discovering Portugal with us. If you liked the video, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel to follow our new releases.